US President Donald Trump arrives home from the hospital after treatment for COVID-19. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. Three days after entering Walter Reed National Medical Center, the world's most famous COVID patient was discharged and flown back to the White House, where he'll continue to recover and receive treatment. For more, we turn now to CGTN's Nathan King. He is at the White House. Nathan, by COVID standards, it was a relatively quick hospital stay. So walk us through the past few days and the treatment the president received.
Well, I'm going to go backwards because what you just witnessed here in the last few seconds before we came on the air, Adam, was quite incredible. We had maybe 5 or 6 different camera shots starting at Walter Reed Medical Center of the president walking out on his own, wearing a mask, and then getting onto Marine One and then landing here. And then he could have just gone straight into the building, but he walked up the stairs and is standing on the balcony as we speak, or just a few seconds ago, of that dramatic south portico of the White House that you see in so many movies, and waving and giving a thumbs up. All of that designed to show, and showing, that the president is walking and able to talk. You are right, it's been an incredible few days, because since essentially Thursday, we have not seen a lot of the president except in very staged moments. What we've heard is that he needed oxygen. What he was heard that his vital signs had dropped to such an extent that people recommended that he go to Walter Reed Medical Center, something he did not want to do, and it's obvious that he only stayed there for a short time. What we've also heard is conflicting reports of what medical treatment he's got, how bad his symptoms are, what his lungs look like, what his vital signs look like, what his oxygen levels look like. What we do know is that the president is still potentially very, very infectious and still has COVID, but has come back here to relax. Now let's listen to the White House physician, Sean Conley, who's basically been the words of the last few days, and not all of them we can really trust. Let's take a listen.
We all remain cautiously optimistic and on guard because we're in a bit of uncharted territory when it comes to a patient that received the therapies he has so early in the course. So we're looking to this weekend. If we can get through to Monday with him remaining the same or improving, better yet, then we will all take that final deep sigh of relief. But as I said, 24/7 world-class medical care surrounding him down there. We're not going to miss anything that we would have caught up here.
Yeah, so you know, you can see optimism there, but essentially, you know, if you were not the President of the United States, you would not be leaving the hospital at this moment. He is on a cocktail of drugs, some of them experimental, some of them having potentially side effects. But you could tell that the President, he's tweeted out, he wants to get back campaigning again. Will he quarantine until all this is over? We don't know, but he's back in the White House. He is surrounded by world-class medical care. But the question is, how long can you keep someone who really wants to get back on the campaign trail? Because the polls are saying, you know, he is behind from the virus. And all the while, many of the staff here have contracted the same disease.
That's right, Nathan. In fact, President Trump wasn't the only one on his team to get the virus. A number of others have since been diagnosed, as well as some members of Congress. And let's not forget, some of your colleagues, White House correspondents, have also been infected.
Yeah, can I tell you something? That I have not gone inside, even to go to the bathroom in the White House in the last couple of weeks, because it's not been great protocols here. And it's not because I blame anyone, it's just the culture here. And you've seen it over the last week or so, largely since about 10 days ago, that Saturday event for the nomination of Amy Coney for the Supreme Court. That is the sort of potential super spreader event. And since then, we have seen so many of the president's team come down, including the press secretary today, Kayleigh McEnany, 2 of her junior staff. We've seen Kellyanne Conway, very much part of that inner circle until recently, has come back to help with the affection. The head of the RNC, the head of the, including the re-election campaign, Bill Stepien, Chris Christie is big debate prep guy, just quite incredible stuff. that we've seen, and including several senators, 2 of which sit on the Judiciary Committee and are needed to usher the Supreme Court nominee through. And I can tell you, there are other people who have tested positive that we do not know about. The White House is saying, look, we have to protect their privacy. We totally understand that. But you do not get this whole full extent of who has been infected. And I can tell you, they are also saying they are not going to do contact testing for everyone who was at that event about 10 days ago now, which is going to create a lot of question marks about how far this virus has spread amongst the elite, especially in the Republican Party in Washington.
Thank you, Nathan. That's CGTN's Nathan King reporting from the White House. Well, there is much to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Joining us here in Washington is Democratic strategist Ameshia Cross. Eric Bolling is in South Carolina. He's a political commentator and the host of America This Week on Sinclair Broadcasting. Chris Smith is a medical consultant specializing in clinical microbiology and virology at the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. And joining us from New York is the chair and president of Access Health International, William Haseltine. His autobiography, My Lifelong Fight Against Disease, from polio and AIDS to COVID-19, will be out later this month. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. William Haseltine, let me start with you. Given what we know about the president's condition, and we know this from his doctors who held these briefings over the weekend, and from the medication that he's been prescribed and has been taking, what is your assessment of what happened to the president and what he's going through right now?
It's clear he has COVID. It's clear that it's symptomatic. That is, he's had breathing difficulties, serious enough to warrant hospitalization, and the extraordinary cocktail of drugs, which is unique in the world to him. I would say there's an old adage, if you're too poor or too powerful, you get bad medicine. In this case, he's extremely powerful. You have to remember, he's the direct commander-in-chief superior to the medical doctors. They have to follow his orders. That's an unusual medical situation. The only way the treatment he's received makes sense is if he's demanding it. The only way he could have been released from the hospital yesterday for a short visit, senseless visit, was if he ordered it. Otherwise, there's no doctor on earth that would have done that. And I would warrant to say there are very few doctors, perhaps none, without orders that would have allowed him to return to the White House, where he has the potential to infect others and suffer really serious disease. Is there an ECMO machine in the White House? What happens if he starts getting clotting disorders and a major stroke, a heart attack, emboli in the lungs? I'm not sure that I've read that he's on anticoagulants. It's the one part of a standard cocktail that so far seems to be missing. This is a really unusual case. And as I say, the only way you can make sense of it if he's calling the shots. And last I remembered, he didn't receive a medical degree as part of his education.
We're looking at live pictures now of the president. He's at the White House. He just got out of that helicopter a few minutes ago. He's outside the White House. I think it's on the South Portico right now. Dr. Haseltine, one other thing, that we saw the president walk on his own to the helicopter. He was flown across the city to the White House, and he got out of that helicopter just a few minutes ago. Does that mean the worst is over? I mean, what is your assessment of a person who's able to do that all by himself?
It's not over. This is a disease which has, once you get it, and once it's serious enough to cause shortness of breath and require oxygen and have your oxygen level drop below a reasonable saturation point that sends you to the hospital, it has a up to 3-week to 4-week tail. You first get a problem called cytokine storm, followed by hypercoagulation, that's blood clots all over the body, followed by hyperinflammation. And the disease course can be very prolonged, as long as 3 to 4 weeks. The first week is not the end of this disease for people who get it with a degree of severity that he appears to have. So he may be one of those who never has to go to an ICU, or by tomorrow morning, he may be stroked out. I can tell you one thing about his medication. The doses of dexamethasone that he's receiving suggest that he was pretty ill. Not only that, they can drive you into a psychotic mania. If you're already rather energetic, as he is, and full of energy, it just adds fuel to that fire and is potentially dangerous for somebody to make important decisions while on high doses of dexamethasone.
So that drug that you're talking about, Dr. Haseltine, dexamethasone, that is the steroid that he was given.
It's a steroid, and everybody knows that steroids elevate your mood, let's call it that, but high doses do more than elevate your mood. They can change your personality, and they can change your rationality.
All right, let me go to Eric Bolling. Eric, looking at what we've just experienced over the past weekend and today and this evening, should not the president have handed power over to his vice president, Mike Pence, given what we just heard from Dr. Haseltine as well?
Oh, Dr. Haseltine fails to mention, or actually accuses the commander of the Navy medical group, the commander, of somehow answering to a superior order rather than answering to his oath to help a patient. I mean, he's claiming that he's allowing the president to go back to a highly structured, highly intense medical scenario in the White House. That's all he's doing. They're transferring him from Walter Reed back to the White House. He's not hitting the campaign trail. I disagree with the doctor on the accusation he levies against Commander Conlon. Also, to say that President Trump may be experiencing a psychotic mania. We see the guy, he takes a ride around yesterday in the Beast with the Secret Service. He waves, he's put out several videos. He goes to the White House, waves on the back South Lawn to the public, speaks to people, but somehow that's interpreted as a possible psychotic mania episode. Dr. Haseltine is playing politics with us.
All right, Dr. Haseltine, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that.
Well, it's not politics. I asked the person who just asked me that question, what other patient has received these medicines in this order? None is the answer. Absolutely none.
Correct. He's the commander-in-chief. He's the most powerful, most important human being on the planet. And the only thing that he gets that other people couldn't get, some of the other stuff that's in phase 2 or phase 3 trials, he gets to jump the line in a phase 2. Yes, he does get to do that, being the commander-in-chief. But to suggest that he shouldn't, that's asinine.
Well, is it asinine to say that he's receiving cocktails of drugs that we have no idea how they interact with one another? No, that's what most people would say. We don't know how these drugs react with one another. And it is unusual to receive dexamethasone at the same time you're receiving remdesivir. Remdesivir is for treatment early in the disease, not late. And he's receiving dexamethasone at the same time he's receiving remdesivir. That is very unusual. And as I say, maybe his commander, the commanding doctor at Walter Reed, is following his own advice. And maybe we can speculate that he's not. I'm not saying the president
or just look at the patient. You know, as a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, but as a doctor, I know I've heard doctors through my entire life say, yes, there are diagnoses. Yes, we can prescribe things. We can apply treatments. But as a doctor, the most important indicator is how does the patient look? How is the patient acting? Doctor, answer. How does he look? How does he act?
All right, I want to move on. I want to move on and get another view right now. And for that, I want to go to Dr. Chris Smith from the United Kingdom. Dr. Smith, President Trump was taken to the hospital on Friday evening. We saw him afterwards. He drove around in his SUV. He was driven around by the Secret Service. He waved to his supporters and his staff. He's now back at the White House. As a doctor, what did you make of that?
Well, I think that if it were me, I'd be tucked up in bed and I'd be asking people to bring me, wearing appropriate PPE, a nice hot toddy so that I could recover. I don't think I'd have resorted to that sort of publicity stunt, but then I'm not the President of the United States. I do think that some of the criticism is reasonable, but I also think that this is a person who wants to demonstrate that he hasn't actually been beaten by this disease. And so I can see both sides of the story, but if it were me, I'd be in bed. We
just heard two very different views on the medications that President Trump was given. What is your view on those medications? Would you have used them in any way?
Well, these are all things which are known to have at least some effect on a person who is infected with coronavirus. What they haven't been done, or what's not been done, is to mix them in this particular way, in this particular context. But I think the bottom line here is nobody knows what is the absolute right way to manage coronavirus, because A, everybody's different, and B, we're still very much learning about this disorder. And although the recovery trial, which was conducted at Oxford University, not far from where I am here in the UK, was responsible for proving that about 30% of people will, well, that's the reduction in mortality if you take dexamethasone. What they haven't done is to say, and let's add all these other things to the mixture. And it's possible that perhaps this interaction of agents will be dramatically good at controlling coronavirus. On the other hand, it might be destructive and deleterious. We just don't know, because no one's actually done the clinical trial. And that's why clinical trials and the proper practice of medicine, where we ask these questions, we standardize our practice, and we make measurements, that's important, and that's got to be done. And it is being done, but I don't think in the context in which it's played out here.
Ameshia Cross, let's not forget, of course, that all this is happening with, less than a month to go before the election. And, you know, in political parlance, we often talk about optics. In fact, we heard our correspondent tell us at the beginning of the program that there was something like half a dozen cameras monitoring this flight from Walter Reed to the White House. It's not a long flight, it's a few minutes. I'm sure the president and his staff had that word, optics, in mind when that happened. But how do you think the events of the past weekend is going to impact the campaign trail over the next few weeks and indeed the election itself?
Well, President Trump and his campaign don't only have optics in mind. That is the front of the mind awareness, the top of the line thing that they are focused on, even more so than I would assume by his actions, his treatment, as well as the possibility that he has to infect others. When it comes to the campaign and the campaign trail, we all know that President Trump gets his energy off of the rallies. He gets his energy off of the people and the fans. That's the reason why he was willing to put so many people at risk by going out yesterday and doing that ride-along to basically wave at fans. When it comes to the campaign itself, we're watching the polls. The polls show that Joe Biden happens to have a higher percent of older people who are going to come out and vote for him. We see that there has been a major shift in a lot of people's views of President Trump, specifically because of the way he has not only handled coronavirus, pre him actually contracting it, but also the way that he has handled it since he got it. We noticed today that when President Trump, and I'm thankful that he was able to speak over the past couple of days and was also able to get out of the hospital. But when you see a president who tweets and basically downplays the severity of COVID-19, when in America we have over 200,000 people who have died and infection rates going up every single day, it is very frustrating to see the commander-in-chief basically act like this is the common cold and you're going to be absolutely fine. When, as the two doctors who you had on spoke to, we're seeing this cocktail of medications, many of which have not been tested very much in clinical trials thus far. And we don't even know within the next few days or the next few weeks what President Trump's health is actually going to look like. And the president's doctor, the White House doctor, hasn't been able to fully answer or refuses to fully answer questions related to lung issues, breathing capacity, and other things that I think are extremely important for the American public to know. So right now, we're watching a president who is dead set on trying to appear as strong as possible. He knows that any sign of weakness hurts him. And I think that with only a few weeks out, and actually a few days out in certain states when it comes to early voting, he fully recognizes that he needs to be present. He needs to have some words that are going to really inspire people to get out and vote for him, and that his base expects him to be Superman, because this is a president who has gone about months now acting as though COVID-19 didn't matter, social distancing didn't matter, wearing masks didn't matter. He played Russian roulette with COVID-19. He played the catch me if you can game with COVID-19, and it actually got him. So instead of falling back, leaning in on the science, and actually taking care of himself right now, he's a lot more concerned with this campaign.
Dr. Haseltine, you raised this question earlier on, and that is, Ameshia just mentioned it as well, and that is we don't know what's going to happen next. Because if we look at what we do know about this disease, COVID-19, so far, we've heard of cases where a COVID patient suffers from very high temperatures, from muscle soreness for about 12 hours, and then for the next 12 hours, the patient seems fine. And then it comes back after 12 hours, a repeat of that. The symptoms return. It comes and it goes. So what kind of risks is the president taking right here? He says he feels okay right now, but that he could return to the way he felt perhaps 2 days ago tomorrow.
He's taking a number of risks. I would say, first of all, the corticosteroids early in the course of disease is actually contraindicated, as a doctor from Great Britain will tell you. That's the other thing that study showed, that yes, it helps very late in the disease, but it doesn't help at all and may be contraindicated earlier in the disease. So that's the first thing. And as I mentioned before, this disease has a very long course. We all know it's unpredictable, but we also know that there are comorbidity factors, which the president shares with many others who suffered very serious disease. That is obesity and age. Those are some of the two greatest comorbidity factors. So I would say at this point, even though he may be feeling well, and steroids help you do that, it doesn't necessarily mean he is well. Time will tell. And then going back to the White House, they don't necessarily have all the equipment that Walter Reed has. Do they have, for example, an external oxygen blood machine that can breathe and pump your blood for you? Maybe they do. Very few places have those. Secondly, are they really prepared for a stroke? What is the hypercoagulation? Are they prepared for a really serious heart attack? You know, a lot of people die from this disease as a result of blood clot.
Right.
They cause leg amputations. Are they ready to amputate his leg in the White House? These are questions. So you may say they have excellent medical facilities. There's a reason he went to Walter Reed, not staying at the White House.
Right, all sounds very alarming. Eric, the president, as Ameshia pointed out a moment ago, has by his own admission played down the seriousness of the pandemic. We know this from the interview he did with Bob Woodward for that book. But then he said this over the weekend. Let's listen to what the president said.
So it's been a very interesting journey. I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it, and I understand it, and it's a very interesting thing.
So, Eric, do you think the president's views on this disease, how it spreads, how it affects the country is going to change right now?
I hope it does, Arnon. I think I've been on this show I don't know how many times, and I've consistently said I think disregard the polls, this president is going to get reelected. The way he treated, and I'll agree with Ameshia, he was whistling past the graveyard with COVID. I'm a guy who's been wearing a mask on airplanes for 2 years prior to any COVID. I think that was a mistake. And this is his opportunity to come out of this with exactly what I think that he's laying the groundwork for. I learned, I was wrong, a mea culpa, and move forward, humble himself and do that. And I think he will win. America loves a comeback story. He will be the comeback story if he does it that way. If he shrugs it off and says, I was right, this is nothing but a bad flu or a cold, I think he's going to run into a lot of opposition. So I have been predicting a win. I still think he's going to win.
Yeah.
The polls matter, but it depends exactly how he comes out of this COVID. Mea culpa.
Right. Problem is, Eric, the initial indications tell us that they're not going to change this. One of his senior campaign officials, Jason Miller, has been saying that we're not going to change our protocols. It's business as usual.
Yeah, they need to tweak that. They need to revamp that. He's got to come out saying, look, it kicked my butt. I'll be the first to admit, and I learned from it. And I think that will ingratiate. He'll win the hearts and minds of some of the people that he's now going to need that I think he probably had. It's amazing. It's amazing the long faces on the Democrat side, though. They were hoping for a much more drawn-out illness. Stock market, Arnon, when he announced he had COVID, it dropped 600 points immediately that night on Thursday night to Friday. Today, up almost 500 points when he left the hospital. Clearly, the American economy, which is indicated by the stock market greatly, wants a President Trump in the White House.
Dr. Smith, looking at the president's vulnerability here, I mean, he checks a lot of the big boxes here. Look at his age. We look at there's a question about his weight. But we also know that there were no problems with his vital organs. That's what his doctors tell us. Are we looking at a relatively strong individual here?
Well, I don't know President Trump's medical history more than what has been published in the newspaper. But you can't argue with the statistics. And that's what matters here, because we've got very big numbers. We acknowledge that about 1 million people have died of this. The current estimates predict that maybe 1 billion people may have so far been infected with it around the world. So we've got pretty big numbers to study, a lot of data to fall back on now. And the same consistent trends are emerging time and time again. And those consistent trends are that the biggest risk factor is age. And as well as age, comorbidities like high blood pressure, like diabetes, and diabetes partner in crime, obesity. And the more of these risk factors you have, the higher your risk. And also, being male has emerged, unfortunately, for me and for half the population of the planet as another major risk factor. In fact, if you look at the numbers of people who present and end up in the most severe situation with coronavirus, about 70% of them are men. So there's a disproportionate impact on males. And there are various reasons that we're beginning to learn about why that might be. So you can see that Donald Trump does tick many of these boxes. But if you take a step back from that and say, well, actually, what is the risk of someone who is his age bracket and with his comorbidities walking away, having been infected? Well, it's not a death sentence. It's a serious illness. It can be severe. It can be lethal. But actually a high fraction of people will recover. And it's not a given that someone who fits those criteria is automatically condemned to get very severely unwell. Some people do, unfortunately, but many don't. And so it is not a given just because you have some of these risk factors that it's going to be bad news for you. But it does mean that one needs to be cautious and be careful, because if you do catch it and you haven't caught it yet and you tick those boxes, you could find yourself in the group of people who are going to come off worse.
Ameshia, I've only got about a minute left, but getting back to the politics of this, what is the feeling in the Joe Biden camp right now? I mean, a lot has happened over the past 72 hours. One of the things that also happened over the past 72 hours is that we had a poll coming out, an NBC poll, which showed that Joe Biden has a national lead of 14 points. We know that national leads don't mean very much, but what is the feeling in the campaign?
Well, the feeling is to keep the pressure on the ground. Joe Biden has a lot of stops to make over the next few weeks. He's doing a lot of events. Fundraising is going really well. I think that for the Biden camp, it is to keep hammering home on COVID-19, not only the importance of being vigilant against it, but also building an economy that actually makes sense. We have to remember that right now, hundreds of thousands of people are also out of work in America. But meanwhile, being out of work, they also lack health care, because in this country, our health care is largely tied to the employment we have.
Right.
So I think that he's going to continue down that path and really continue to set the differentiation between what his administration would look like and what we've seen from President Trump.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you to everyone for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.